After my father died, my brother-in-law demanded I sign over my inheritance as gratitude for marrying into their family. When I refused, he locked me out of the house and said, "This is how we treat greedy wives." I waited in the rain, heartbroken. 3 days later, they were served with papers that made their smiles disappear. After my dad died, everything in my life changed, and not because of grief that I expected. What I didn't expect was how quickly my own family would turn on me. He passed on a Monday afternoon, a massive heart attack. I had just gotten off the phone with the ICU nurse when Mason, my sister's husband, came into the living room like he owned the place. "Did he leave you the house?" he asked, straight-faced. "No condolences." "No, how are you holding up?" "Just that." I was still holding my breath, waiting to cry, and he was already thinking about what he could get. Mason had always been a loud, pushy guy. The kind who tells stories at parties that you're pretty sure are lies, but no one calls him out because it's easier to just let him talk. He used to own a startup, then a consulting firm, then a real estate coaching group. In reality, he lived off my sister April's nursing salary and constantly borrowed money from anyone dumb enough to believe his next big pitch. He married April 6 years ago. She was different before him. She was always quiet, but in a calm, strong way. After Mason, that quiet turned into something else, like she was always trying not to set him off. Dad saw it. We all did. He didn't like Mason, but he kept the peace. When Mom died of breast cancer, he focused on keeping the family stable. I moved back in with him. I took him to his appointments, helped him get his diabetes under control, managed his bills. April and Mason would visit maybe once every few months, if that. Dad made it clear long before he passed that he was leaving me the house. He said he wanted to make sure I had something solid. "So no one can ever leave you out in the cold," he told me once. He had no idea how literal that would become. After the funeral, we all met at the house. People were coming and going. I was standing in the kitchen cleaning up when Mason walked in and closed the door behind him. "You know, it's tradition in our family for wives to show appreciation when they're taken care of." I blinked. "What?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You should sign the house over. As gratitude. We're all family. You wouldn't have anything without April's family." I thought he was joking. I laughed and said, "You're not serious." His face went stone cold. "You think this is funny?" I said, "Yes, because it is. You've never lifted a finger to help my dad." He got closer. "April helped him. That makes it ours." I told him to leave the kitchen and went to find April. She looked exhausted, and when I told her what he said, she just sighed, like she wasn't shocked. "Maybe you should just sign it over," she said. "You're not serious." He's been under stress. It would make things easier. "Easier for who?" I asked. "You too." She wouldn't answer, just walked away. I tried to let it go, thinking it was just Mason being Mason. But 2 days later, I came home from work and my key didn't work. At first I thought it was a mistake. I tried again. Nothing. I rang the bell. Knocked. No answer. Then Mason appeared in the window, smirking. "This is how we treat greedy wives," he said. "Go be grateful somewhere else." I stood there for a long time. It started to rain. My jacket soaked through. I had a grocery bag in one hand and my purse in the other. I just stood there, cold and stunned. That was the moment everything in me hardened. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream or threaten him. I just walked away. I drove to my friend Lacey's apartment, cried in the shower for an hour, called Dad's lawyer the next morning. He'd expected something like this. "Your father left the house to you alone," he said. "It's in your name. They have no legal right to be there." 3 days later, they were served. I filed for an emergency injunction. We had the paperwork to prove I was the sole legal owner. Mason tried to talk big when the deputy showed up. Said I was stealing from family. But the cop had the court order in hand. "You have 2 hours to leave," he said. "After that, you'll be arrested for trespassing." April didn't say a word. She just kept her eyes down and packed their things. I stood there and watched. Silent. They were gone by sunset. But I wasn't finished. That was just the start. After they left, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be it. I thought they'd cut their losses and move on. But I didn't know just how far Mason was willing to go. The day after the eviction, I got a text from an unknown number. Hope the house keeps you warm at night. You won't have anything else soon. I blocked it, but I knew it was him. Then my bank account froze. At first, I thought it was fraud. I called customer service, and they said a family member had reported potential elder financial abuse tied to my dad's estate. I couldn't touch any of the funds I'd inherited until it was cleared up. Mason had filed a claim. He told the bank I had manipulated my dad while he was mentally unfit. Claimed I forged documents. He even submitted an affidavit signed by April saying Dad had made promises to support them both if anything ever happened. It didn't matter that it was all lies. The bank was just covering itself. So I lawyered up again. It cost me more than I want to admit. I had to pull money from my retirement account just to pay for legal fees. Meanwhile, I was using food stamps and skipping utilities to stay afloat. April never called. Never apologized. Never even checked in. She let him drag my name through the mud, and she signed every false document he put in front of her. I started hearing rumors from neighbors. That I'd thrown my own sister out on the street. That I'd tricked my dying father into giving me everything. I could see people's faces change when I walked into the grocery store. That's the part Mason was good at, planting poison, letting it spread. He even showed up at my job. I work at a local CPA office in Glendale. We do taxes and basic financial advising. Mason showed up during lunch, made a scene in the lobby, yelling about how I was a fraud and how people shouldn't trust a woman who lies to her dying father. My boss had to call security. I thought I'd get fired. I didn't, but it was close. That night, I sat in my dad's old recliner and stared at the wall for hours. Everything he'd left me was poison now. The money, the home, my name, all because Mason couldn't stand not being in control. And April, she just let it happen. So I started documenting everything. The forged statements, the false reports, the harassment at work. I even recorded one of his voicemails, where he told me to enjoy being the queen of ashes. My lawyer said, if he wants war, let's give him war. That's when we hit back. We filed a defamation suit. We sent cease and desist letters to every place Mason had called about me. We subpoenaed April's text records to show how she admitted to knowing the will was legitimate. But there was more. Much more. Because during that process, something came up that changed everything. We discovered Mason had taken out a credit card in my father's name before he died. Maxed it out. Over $9,000 in charges. Luxury items. Flights. Crypto. It was federal fraud. And I had the documents to prove it. Now, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. Finding out about the credit card fraud cracked everything wide open. It turned out Mason hadn't just been greedy. He'd been reckless. The card was opened in my dad's name 2 months before he passed. April was the one who faxed over the paperwork. She listed her own cell number as the contact. They used the card to buy a new TV, a $1,200 watch, 2 first-class tickets to Vegas, and a load of stuff from some luxury men's site. They never thought anyone would check. They probably assumed that once Dad passed, it would all disappear into the noise of grief and paperwork. But now it was evidence. And my lawyer wasn't the only one interested. We handed it over to the DA's office in Los Angeles County. Elder financial abuse, mail fraud, and identity theft felonies. I didn't even know investigators were looking into it until one afternoon. I saw 2 unmarked cars parked across from my driveway. A man and a woman in plain clothes walked up and asked if they could speak inside. They were from the DA's Financial Crimes Division. We're looking into several complaints involving your brother-in-law and deceased father, the woman said. We're also investigating whether your sister knowingly participated. I told them everything. I handed over my files. I gave them copies of the credit card statements and showed them where Mason had forged my father's signature. A month later, Mason was arrested. They picked him up at a gas station near Reseda. The charge sheet was long. April wasn't arrested yet, but she was listed as a cooperating witness. That's when the real twist came. April showed up at my door. She looked like she hadn't slept in days.
Pale.
Shaking. She said, "Can I talk to you?"
I didn't want to let her in.
But something in her voice stopped me. We sat in the living room. She wouldn't look me in the eye. "Mason told me we'd lose everything if I didn't sign the affidavit," she said. "He said you'd drag us through court, that you were trying to steal what was rightfully ours."
Isterte her.
"Do you believe that?" She started crying. "I don't know what I believe anymore." Then she told me everything. Mason had been abusive for years. Emotionally, financially, sometimes physically. She had no control over the money. He'd forced her to give up her savings to fund his investments. She stayed because she thought it was her duty, and because he said no one else would have her. He said if I ever turned on him, he'd make sure no one would believe me, she whispered. I didn't forgive her, but I listened. She said she was ready to testify, that she wanted out, that she didn't care what happened to her as long as Mason paid for what he did. I believed her, but I also knew the system wouldn't just take her word for it. So I told her, if you're serious, you need to give them everything. She nodded. I already did. The court date came 6 months later. Mason was charged with multiple counts of fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft. April testified under oath. She brought receipts, literally, emails, voicemails, handwritten notes where Mason bragged about squeezing every last cent from my dad before he died. Her testimony was brutal. She said Mason made her lie, that he threatened to leak old photos of her if she didn't cooperate, that he said he'd empty her bank account and leave her with nothing, that he told her I was the enemy, that I was spoiled, manipulative, that I deserved to be punished. I sat in the courtroom, staring at the man who'd humiliated me, lied about me, tried to steal the home my father left me out of love, and I saw something new in Mason's eyes. Fear. He wasn't yelling anymore, wasn't smug. He was pale and silent and sweating through his shirt. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all major counts. The judge didn't go easy. Mason was sentenced to 7 years in state prison, with a mandatory minimum of 4 before parole. He was also ordered to pay restitution, every cent of the fraud, plus penalties. April walked out of court without saying a word to me. I didn't expect her to, but a week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, 2 lines. I'm sorry I let him do what he did. I hope someday you'll believe I loved you before all this. I didn't write back. Maybe one day, but not yet. I took time off work. I had repairs done to the house, fixed the roof, replaced the door he locked me out of. I planted the garden my dad always wanted, but never got around to. The neighbors started saying hi again. I don't forget what happened. I don't forgive. But I survived. I held my ground. I lost my sister, but I kept my father's house. And my name. And Mason? He'll be sitting in a cell for a long time, eating state food, wearing a jumpsuit, thinking about all the ways he thought he could win. This house is mine. My peace is mine. And no one will take that from me again.